Hi, it's Lisa, and I have something for you I don't normally do, and that is an unboxing video. So, I made a video a while ago about books that are worth having in a nice edition, and this is kind of a follow up to that. I made a decision that I wanted to save up my book allowance and buy a set of books that I loved as a child in a hardback form. And they're kind of pricey. Well, I will say this, it's 9 books and I paid $118. So that's not terrible price for 9 hardback books. But what the books are the hardback set of Little House on the Prairie. So I want to do an unboxing video of this, go through these, and just share some thoughts. So if you were someone who loved Little House on the Prairie as a child, or if you're not that familiar with them and you're curious about them, I would love to share with you. And I also want to share just the experience of opening them from Lakeside Books. Now, I think that I ordered them from Thrift Books, perhaps. I don't even remember, but they came shipped from Lakeside Books in Benton Harbor, Michigan. So the first one, okay, so first is Little House on the Prairie. So you may be most familiar with Little House on the Prairie because it was the one that they turned into the show. Like they called the show Little House on the Prairie. But Little House on the Prairie is not actually the first one. So I'm going to be doing these out of order. I'm just going to be doing them in the order that I open them. But when I get to the end, I'll show you all 9 of them in order. So why did I want the hardback of this? I wanted the hardback because I truly loved these books as a child, and I have some of the paperbacks still. However, I want to share them with my granddaughters now, and I want them to be sturdy. I want them to be books that they love now and that we will have copies of that they can read with their children and maybe even their grandchildren. I actually own a book that was my great grandfather's that he got in September of 1889. And it's an edition of Charles Dickens' Bleak House. And there's something precious about having it. And just the idea that my great grandchildren might have a book that I bought. And I am going to write in the flyleaf when these were purchased and my name so that if they ever read them. So one of the things that I love about the Little House books, and I think everyone loves, are the fantastic illustrations by Garth Williams. So Garth Williams illustrations, and this is the photo of when Pa is building their little house and he has to use his the tarp, the cover of the wagon is what he uses as a roof. These illustrations are so evocative. Just seeing them, all I have to see is the illustration to remember exactly what's going on. In this particular scene, their bulldog Jack, they thought had washed away down the river, and in the night on the prairie they see some animal creeping, and it is indeed Jack. And I will never forget the first time I read that and the joy I felt that Jack was alive. And truly, when Jack dies, it's very hard for me. I seriously could have a t-shirt that says, "Hey, Laura Ingalls, when Jack died, that was really hard for me." So I don't know. I would love to know in the comments if you have a book that had an animal in it that you loved. Not necessarily, well, I guess it could be like Black Beauty or something, or Charlotte's Web, where the animal is the story. In this book, the animal isn't the story, but he's still such a part of the family. So these illustrations are so incredible. I don't think we can overstate what Garth Williams did for children's illustration. He actually met Laura Ingalls and met with her, and he ended up doing the illustrations for other books like Charlotte's Web and another E.B. White book called Stuart Little. And he also he illustrated like 100 books. Some of my favorites are some of the little golden books that he illustrated that were written by Margaret Wise Brown, who did Goodnight Moon. So Garth Williams is truly, truly one of my heroes. I think a large part of my mental health as a child I can credit to Garth Williams. So I wanted this edition. I wanted the ones with his illustrations. So I love the hardback. They've done a nice job on it. The dust jacket is beautiful. They've conveniently put an age here in the inside flyleaf. And in this case, it says for Little House on the Prairie, ages 8 to 12. Now, I will say that I'm reading Little House on the Prairie to my just barely turned 6-year-old granddaughter and my 4-year-old granddaughter, and they are enjoying it. So remember that ages are often the read myself as opposed to the read aloud. If you're going to read aloud, you can start earlier. So I love Little House on the Prairie. This book, let me find... Let's look at that. Well, okay, let me talk about this one before I open the next one. Okay, so Little House on the Prairie is not the first book. Little House on the Prairie is actually the second book. Little House on the Prairie is when they've left their home in the little house in the big woods of Wisconsin, and they have headed to Kansas. Now, some people have thrown shade on this book because they say that they're offended by Laura Ingalls' characterization of American Indians. They do not like the way that they are treated. They do not like what they see as racism. They do not like this idea. And while I respect that and I can understand why it's difficult, I would say that anyone who thinks that we can make it as history and that the people's attitudes didn't exist by erasing their books is a very dangerous person in my mind. Because when we erase the history, we erase our own growth. And I think it's important for us to look at these things and say, wow, we've come a long way and we have a lot more respect for people now. Like there's a part in it where it says like, this is unsettled territory, and it's a good opportunity to share with children. It wasn't actually unsettled. It was unsettled by like colonial Americans. It was unsettled by Western European pioneers, but it wasn't unsettled. And talking about like the Indian territory, and there are parts here where the Indians leave, like on the on trails, being forced out of their homes, and that is worth discussing. And so, if we don't have the books anymore, we're not going to be able to discuss it. I also think it's pretty prideful, pretty arrogant of us to assume that we're the ones who are the arbiters of all goodness. That there aren't any things that we're doing right now that 100 years from now are going to be seen as completely ridiculous and unacceptable attitudes and behaviors that in 100 years somebody might want to wipe out all our books. So I don't agree with that. I think it's a dangerous thought. I think we want to have conversations, and these books start conversations. So there's one point in here that very, very precious. I remember when Laura, her heart is like turned and yearning toward this baby, and it's startling. And I remember thinking it through when I was 7 or 8 years old and thinking about what that meant and what that would mean and how people felt. And that would never have happened if somebody had canceled this book. So Little House on the Prairie, not the first one, but the first one I opened. Let's see what we have next. Now, I want to say something about these. This, they don't even know they're getting a shout out from me, but this Lakeside Books, I have not seen a box of books better packed than this. They've wrapped every book is wrapped in this paper, and then there's other paper shoved in. It's all so well protected. Every book is arriving. Like that one I opened, it's absolutely perfect. I'm about to open this one, and it's perfect too. So this is On the Banks of Plum Creek. So interestingly, Laura Ingalls never won a Newbery. However, she won Newbery honors. So a number of her books were Newbery honor books, even though she didn't win the medal. And this is one of those. So On the Banks of Plum Creek is one of my 3 favorites of these novels. And this comes after Little House on the Prairie. So On the Banks of Plum Creek, they've left their home on the Kansas prairie, and they have moved to Minnesota, and they build, I'm going to see if I can find a picture of it really quick. Here I can. Oh, I remember the scene. So they build a home. It's a dugout. They build into the banks of the creek. The roof of the home, the roof of their home is actually just sod. It's dirt. And in one scene, I knew I was going to find it. In one scene, an ox puts his foot right through the roof of their house. So it's really kind of amazing, right? So sorry, I had a weirdness happen. My screen went black. So this is one of my favorites. Now, one thing I want you to notice is that the books, they actually change the font size based on the reading level of the book. So notice the font size here. And I will show you later on when I open some of the other ones that are for older kids, how it will get smaller. So this book is one of my favorites because it just feels like utopia. I have always wanted to live on the banks of Plum Creek, and I just loved I loved the stories of all the things that happen there. Pa and his fiddle, and the girls go to school and they get covered with leeches. And I know that doesn't sound amazing, but it's really great. So just like, look at the cover. I remember staring at this cover for hours. And then here's Pa out there, right? But like Ma in there doing her ironing while Laura runs in the grass with Jack the Bulldog. In Little House on the Prairie, Jack the Bulldog under the wagon. All right, let's look at the next one. Oh, okay. This one is out of order. So this is the first 4 years. Now you can see, like, look at the difference in size. The first 4 years is an incomplete book, meaning that it was written and she never really finished it. And it is the first book. It doesn't have as many illustrations. It still says ages 8 to 12, but friends, yeah, okay, but 12, right? So what this is Laura and her husband Almanzo. This is the first 4 years of the marriage of Laura and Almanzo, and it includes the birth of their daughter, Rose. Now, this is important because Rose Wilder actually became an author before her mother. And she was the one who encouraged Laura to write. And so it's fun, if you're a huge fan, to have the story of Rose's birth come out. Again, with Garth Williams, fantastically evocative illustrations. And again, just one of the most precious stories. And I love this discussion about whether there is whether what they'd gone through was worth it. In the back of the book, one of the things that always struck me was this illustration. And it's a plate that Laura actually owned, Laura and Almanzo, that said, "Give us this day our daily bread." And it survived the fire. It was something that they bought for their first Christmas together, and it survived the fire that burned their home. And I just think that's precious. So the first 4 years is for the diehards, right? It's book number 9 in the series. It's the last one. All right. Oh, okay. Little Town on the Prairie. Little Town on the Prairie is actually one of the later novels. Now, this is another one that was a Newbery honor. It also says ages 8 to 12. I just saw that on the inside flyleaf. This one, Laura's getting older. This is one of the later ones. I'm looking to find an illustration that I love. We can see as she's getting older. And this one is an important book because it shows, here's the whole cover. Little Town on the Prairie takes place after the Long Winter. Now, The Long Winter is a book that was written about the winter of 1880 to 1881. And this was a very, very, very difficult winter. And that when I just recently read a book for adults, a nonfiction book called The Beautiful Snow. I'll link to it in the description box. But in The Beautiful Snow, it talks about that actual winter and what happened. And a lot of the things that are covered in The Long Winter, I'll talk about later with that, are very difficult, very sad. And Little Town on the Prairie takes place after that, and it's the same town. So the same town that survived the Long Winter now is going to be Little Town on the Prairie. And I love this book because it's like what comes after, right? It's what comes after. Mary goes off to college in this book. So the family is growing up. Almanza Wilder begins courting Laura. We can see her get much older through this book. This book is a bridge book. And it talks about just the life on the plains. There's Almanzo and Laura getting ready to go on a date. And this book is just for those who have read the earlier books, and you get to this book and you see, okay, they've made it over the hump, right? They've made it over the hump and they're into happy times. This book, Farmer Boy, is actually in order. It comes after Little House on the Prairie. So it's the third book chronologically. Now, it's not about Laura. It's about Almanza Wilder, who becomes her husband. So he's growing up on a farm in upstate New York, and that's what this book is about. It's about Almanzo growing up on a farm in upstate New York. And so you get a lot of farm life. You also get, so when I say upstate New York, I mean upstate. So Almanza Wilder is actually, I believe, a distant cousin of mine. He's from the county of Franklin, and Franklin County borders Canada. The border of the county is the Canadian border. And so you get these, like, some of the stories of like the trappers, like the French Canadian trappers. And so this story is precious to me because my family lived in that area. I have some ancestors on my father's side who emigrated from Quebec and lived there. You also get some insight into what life was like peddlers in wagons, and of course this kind of bucolic farm life. So I love this book. It's one of the thicker ones. I read it to my children. I believe that my oldest son was 7 or 8 when I read these. So they would have been, if he was 8, they would have been 8, 5, and 3 when I read them these books. Okay, well, here we go with the long winter, the one that happens right before Little Town on the Prairie. So the long winter is the one about that winter, 1880 to 1881. It's a very difficult story, another Newbery Honor winner. Now, what's happening in the long winter is the trains can't get through because of the snow. And there are blizzards in Dakota Territory, and lots of stuff is going on. You'll see like storm and wind on in almost all of the illustrations. There's not a lot of happiness here. You're going to get like random snowflakes on the pages. There's a lot of musical lyrics in here to some of the songs that they sing. And that is, I love that part. There's a lot of what I would call the culture is in here, which I love. I'm looking for a specific illustration. So what we find is that they're bored, right? So they're cold, they're hungry, and they're bored. There's not a lot to do. You could tell from the illustration, it's all about the snow. Laura learns a lot about herself. Laura grows a lot. They're very, very hungry. So they're hungry, they're tired, they're cold, they're lonely, they're bored. And they learn a lot about community, about helping each other, about sticking together. I think there are more life lessons in this book than in any of the others. And this one, even though I think a lot of people feel like the long winter is a slog in some ways, like, oh my gosh, is this depressing winter ever going to end? I think it's the one that made the greatest impression on me as a child myself, of just recognizing that families go through hard times and that people go through hard times, and that they're a challenge to you, and they're something that show you who you are. One of the chapters at the end is called "It Can't Beat Us." And I've always just loved that. So blizzard after blizzard after blizzard, but then in the end, here come the trains. And I think that it's just such a beautiful, beautiful treatment of this. Now, one thing I would recommend, if you're reading this with kids, maybe you read a beautiful snow at the same, or the beautiful snow at the same time, and then you can like share any extra things. Or maybe you have an older child, like a teenager, who could read the beautiful snow as part of their social studies, especially if you're a homeschooler. I cannot tell you how well they packed this box. Lakeside Books, man, they are just really impressing me. Okay, so the next book I have is By the Shores of Silver Lake. So By the Shores of Silver Lake. I'm getting more and more covered with paper here. So By the Shores of Silver Lake is a fun one. This one happens after, it comes in order after On the Banks of Plum Creek. So they leave Plum Creek. So after this one, now we get this one. They go By the Shores of Silver Lake. I like this one because of the geography. So it never was one of my very, very favorites. However, if you teach westward expansion, this is a really good one because you learn a lot about like the geography of the Great Plains. You learn a lot about westward migration, pioneer migration, a lot about the building of the railroad. So this is a really nice companion to westward expansion and manifest destiny and all of the pioneer migration. The Prairie, right? The Great Plains. So By the Shores of Silver Lake is where the area where they settle and they end up there. There's this brand new town being built out there on the shores of Silver Lake. This one is another Newbery honor. Well, another Newbery honor, These Happy Golden Years. So this one is actually the second to the last book when you go in order. This comes right before the first 4 years. So this book covers Laura now as almost an adult. She's like 15 or 16. She becomes a teacher and she moves 12 miles away to teach. And so she's living away from mom and pa for the first time. And some difficulties happen and living with strangers and all these different things that happen. And she doesn't really love living there. And it's kind of difficult. She's got some issues that happen. And I think that there's letter writing and there's her relationship with Almanzo developing. Again, as always, we get the beautiful illustrations by Garth Williams. I just can't say enough about them. But you can see on the cover. I think it's interesting because when you're reading this book, there's a lot of hard times, and yet she calls it These Happy Golden Years. And so I think that in itself is this own beautiful lesson to us about how sometimes our hardest times can later, we look back on them and they're wonderful. And so here we have, at the very end, Laura and Almanzo get married at the end of that. So, I just got chills. Oh, last one. Okay, another shout out to Lakeside Books. Every single one of these beautifully packaged, every single one in perfect condition. And I cannot tell you how many books I get in the mail that arrive all messed up. And so they do a good job. All right, so Little House in the Big Woods, the very first one, the last shall be first. So Little House in the Big Woods is a story of Laura and Mary and her ma and pa and her little sister Carrie, and they're living in a house in the big woods of Wisconsin. And all of the things that happen, they're playing in the snow, their cousins come to visit for Christmas. Notice again, well, let me show you. I showed you this big font. Now look here at the font in These Happy Golden Years. It's just a little bit smaller, just a little bit less white space. But we've got this dance. We've got, I could just do the illustrations all day long. Here's their extended family for Christmas. And there they are. And this is Christmas. And Laura gets her doll. She just loves her doll. I love the kids like made up in pallets on the floor. I can remember reading that as a little girl. Now, this book also says ages 8 to 12. And again, I would say that is for being reading yourself. Read aloud 5 years old can probably handle it, especially if you've been reading aloud to your child all along. If you just start reading aloud, they're not going to want to start with a book like this. However, there's an illustration on almost every page. So Little House in the Big Woods is number one. All right, so let me put my stack in order here. So here's the order of them, if you want them in order. And can you order these individually? Yes. I decided to get them all at once so I could make sure I had continuity, and also because I'd been saving my book allowance. So Little House in the Big Woods. Then we have Little House on the Prairie, best known because it's a TV show, Little House on the Prairie. Then technically Farmer Boy is next. Whoops. Okay. And how she wrote them. Okay, so Farmer Boy, then, and like how like Almanzo is the right age there. Then after that, we have On the Banks of Plum Creek, the Banks of Plum Creek. Then after that, we have By the Shores of Silver Lake. And then we have The Long Winter. And then we have Little Town on the Prairie, right? The town comes from the ashes after the long winter. Then These Happy Golden Years. And then lastly, The First 4 Years. Now, in addition to unboxing these books, which I'm going to set back down here in their box, I want to share with you one other book that I've had for a while. I asked for this for a gift a number of years ago for Christmas. And this book is called Pioneer Girl. And what this is the publication of Laura's first attempt at writing her life. It's what became all of these books. And so in it, you have the text of Pioneer Girl, but then you also have annotations, notes. And in addition to the annotations, there are illustrations as well. Like here's an actual photograph of baby Grace, Laura's younger sister. You learn a lot about Rose Wilder's writing career as well. And you get maps of the places where they lived. If you love Laura Ingalls, if you loved these, if you loved the Little House books, then this book is definitely worth having. So Pioneer Girl, the annotated autobiography. So it's a big book. And sometimes the price of books is different when you look. The inside flyleaf of this says it's $39.95. It is published by the South Dakota Historical Society Press. So that is a good one. Well, I would love to hear, I would so love, I know this isn't like really the kind of video I usually do. I don't normally do an unboxing, but what I would say is if you love the Little House books, I would love to hear your favorite. I would love to hear any of the thoughts you have about if there are any books that you don't own that you had when you were a kid that you would love to buy back. I cannot tell you the joy that it gave me to open that up. I've heard people say that like it's better to spend money on experiences and not things. I don't know that those two things are separate. Spending money on books to me is spending money on an experience because reading is an experience. And when you read it yourself, it's one experience. And then when you share it with someone else, that's another experience altogether. And so I know these books are going to bring joy to me and my family for decades to come. So I am going to end. So I need to go find a place to store these books because they need to be on display. And be sure to check out the description box. I'll link to that Lakeside Books because it's amazing and some of the other things. So thank you for watching. And please, I really do want to hear what your favorite one is and if you have other books that you would like to own in a beautiful edition.